So our next speaker is Mpho Seboni. See him right there. I'll just read his bio quickly. Mpho Seboni is a member of the board, CEO, Financial Services, Private Equity and Technology, Communications, Media and Practices. He consults with leaders across industries with particular expertise in the financial services, technology, communications, and media industries. He has, a wide-ranging expertise. He has a BA in economics, psychology from McGill University in Canada, and a Master of Science in Management from Oxford University. I will hand over to Mpho for the masterclass. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. And once again, thank you for inviting me and my colleagues who are in the room with you, Fungai and Nandika. Maybe they could, I can't see them, but if they could wave their hands just so that everybody who's in the room know who they are. And the best part is that any difficult questions, I'm going to ask them to answer. Great. So the topic today is the behavioral traits of executive and non-executive directors. And given the audience today, we have shaped the discussion to be as relevant to you as possible. And we're going to do that by covering a couple of topics. The first is to recap on what our 2024 board index indicated. Our annual board index is an analysis of activities in boards. It will shortly be available online, but we've published the results, and we will give you a sense of what they are for this year. Then coming to the roles of executive and non-executive directors, we see them as a ship and interdependently working together. We'll then speak about the characteristics of an effective board, the context in which board members are assessed, and the behaviors that make them successful. And we've distinguished between board member behaviors and leadership capabilities, which are the behaviors, the capabilities of executives. As you can imagine, because they've got different roles, board members versus executives, they need to be assessed differently. We'll then speak about the Spencer Stuart leadership model and how it influences the way in which we assess directors, non-executive and executive, and then talk about board culture, because that is actually what is most important. What's most important is what happens in the interaction between board members in the room. I don't know what the protocol is, but if you have a question as I'm going along, I think it's better if you just stop me and ask the question there, as opposed to waiting for the presentation to finish. Great. Let's then look at some of the highlights of the 2024 index especially as they relate to women who are currently directors or who aspire to be directors. Our board index tracks the activities of the top 50 on the JSE. Obviously, we also track activities of board members on the London Stock Exchange, the DAX in Frankfurt, the New York Stock Exchange, etc. So the report that I referred to earlier, that you can access online, it'll show you South Africa versus, I think, 18 other countries. 37% of the directors on the JSE are women, just over 1/3. 32% are historically disadvantaged South Africans, Africans, colored, Indians, right? And 40% of non-executive directors are women. So however you look at it, it's less than 50. Technically, it's less than 40. The average tenure on JSE company boards is 6.4 years, let's say 6.5, and for women, 4.6. In other words, women stay for a shorter time on boards than their male counterparts. That creates a question, but also an opportunity. The one question is why do they stay for a shorter time? The fact that they are staying for a shorter time means, hopefully, newer entrants to the boardroom have an opportunity. And obviously, the longer you can stay, the better. 68% of non-executives serve on more than one board. I can't quite remember the actual average at 2 years, to 2 boards, 3 boards, etc. But overall, 2/3 of NEDs have more than one board role. The challenge is if they are serving on maybe 3, 4, or 5 boards, and that is quite common, are they able to make the kind of contribution to each one of those boards sufficiently? There's no magic wand, but many of our clients look at a non-executive director with 5 boards askance, where they're more encouraged when the person has maybe 2 boards or maximum 3. Listed boards. As far as attendance goes, 98% of board members actually do attend board meetings, which suggests that boardroom activity is something that they treasure and they make every effort to attend. But as you can imagine, with 68% of directors serving on more than one board, attendance might be compromised in the future. Coming to the nub of today's discussion, which is the behavioral traits of executive and non-executives. We view the boardroom as a ship. Executives keep the engine running. Non-executives provide guidance, monitor, and clear any obstacles. So 2 very different roles, but they are interdependent and complementary. Because they are different roles, we, at Spencer Stuart, assess them differently. But before we go into that, let's just look at the roles once again on 4 dimensions: core focus, influence style that is appropriate, contribution, and risk orientation. On the executive side, the focus, as you can imagine, is on operational leadership. Sorry, before I carry on, can you see my mouse moving?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great, thank you. I've just had problems earlier this week, but great, thank you. And then the board non-executives, their role, as I implied on the previous slide, is strategic oversight and governance. Somebody said in a book I read that the CEO of Microsoft, right, Satya Nadella, he said the role of the chairman is to judge the judgment of the CEO. And you can extend that thinking to the board. The role of the board is to judge the judgment of executives. It's not to get operationally involved in the decisions, but to review and advise on decisions to take. The influence style, or the behavior that is most important, as an executive director, direct authority is that's how executives execute their tasks. And by direct authority, I don't mean authoritarianism. I just mean they have the power to be bold and influential and directly in their spheres of influence. The board exercises indirect influence through the same mechanism of probing and suggesting and counseling management. The key contribution source for executives is through people and task delivery. The board's key contribution is around strategy and the challenge around strategy, plus assurance from a governance and risk perspective. Lastly, risk orientation of the executives. Executives prize risk-taking. The board assesses the quality of the risk taken through governance and applying risk mitigation strategies. Any thoughts or questions before I go on? I forgot to say, I had every intention of coming to do this presentation physically. My flight from Europe landed a little later than expected this morning, and I knew I wouldn't be able to get to Randburg in time. There are no questions here. I'll proceed.
There is a question, Mpho.
Oh, okay, please, thank you. I can't hear the question.
On the issue of risk orientation, I'm a little concerned that we are saying that the board is primarily reactive because they only look at the way you have pronounced it. I see this mitigation, but it came across as saying the board will only look at the risk after the fact.
No.
Once the executive has performed on it.
Right, no. The board creates a risk profile, and it is against the governance part of that is by looking holistically at the risk profile and advising both before and after the risk has been taken. Obviously, certain risks don't even make it to the boardroom. from a management point of view. But systemic risks, like if you're a bank, it would be the portfolio that you have of credit and loans, right? So what the board does is with management, set the framework for risk, and then as issues arise, they either speak about it beforehand because it is such an important risk, or after the fact because it is within management's domain to take certain decisions. So it's a symbiotic relationship. Thank you. So how does a board...
Thank you. May I pose my question?
Yes, please.
Thank you. You already are looking at the ED and the NED roles, and I would like for you, and I'm not sure if I'm preempting the rest of the presentation, to address when the chairperson of a board has to come and become a caretaker CEO, that segregation of duties and the conflict of interest, and who actually manages that process and oversees it to ensure that there is the integrity of roles. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. I'm not addressing it in the rest of the presentation, so I'll address it now. It is highly unusual that the chairman steps into an executive chairman role. It is usually done under circumstances that the company will determine, and it is always done for a short period. Clearly, when it does happen, that suggests a whole heap of things have gone awry. The fact that you can't appoint one of the other executives, whether it's the COO, the CEO, in an acting capacity, while you're getting ready to replace the CEO, the fact that you don't have either trust in their competence or integrity, that is a big red flag. But as you say, it does happen. We're just counseling boards not to do that, but to do it only under extreme circumstances. Then the second part of your question was, who supervises the chairman when the chairman has stepped into an executive role? This is when board behavior and board dynamics become crucial, and we'll get to board dynamics in a moment. From a formal structure point of view, the lead independent director would take on, let's say,
We have another question. Sorry.
Yeah. I'll just finish.
One more question. Sorry to interrupt you. Oh, you're finishing the question.
No, I was finishing the answer. So the answer was, the second part of the answer is the lead independent director takes on a senior role and basically chairs the board and, in this case, supervises the chairman who has stepped into an executive role. I see a question from Soraya.
Oh, yes. Okay, it says on the 98% board meeting attendance figures, is this not also influenced by fees for attendance, thus not necessarily for the commitment to corporate governance?
That is possible, but at the same time, a number of boards do not pay per meeting. They have a flat fee that is dispersed, either quarterly or every trimester. So it's not dependent on the number of meetings you attend. Some boards do have a per meeting structure. So your question has validity in it. But the majority of companies on the JSE, at least on the top 50, pay a flat fee for membership of the board and membership of committees. And your question actually raises the issue of the inappropriateness in many cases of permitting fee structures. Was there another question, or should I go on?
Yes, the last one from Palesa. It says, to what extent does board diversity play a role to behavioral traits?
We'll come to that. And if I haven't answered it satisfactorily in the section on dynamics, please raise it again. How does the board deliver value? It's through strategic alignment and oversight. We've talked about that. It is through composition and diversity. And diversity has two meanings. One is diversity of demographics, age, race, and gender. But diversity is also in the skill sets. It's in making sure that you've got the right combination of skills on the board. Culture and behavior. And the assumption is, sorry, let me just go back to diversity. We are diverse in a board so that we can bring different perspectives, skill sets onto the board. Culture and behavior, and that speaks to dynamics. It's how the members of the board interact in productive, constructive dialogue, both in the room and outside. The board also, through governance structures and meeting discipline, deliver impact, making sure that they are focusing the discussion on the right things. That's what we mean by meeting discipline. It's not necessarily the length of the meetings, even though that is a consideration. It's how the board disciplines itself to deal with the most important issues and makes sure that there's adequate time devoted to them. Lastly, very, very importantly, a lot of boards spend an inordinate amount of time reviewing the past, whether it's the immediate past or the near-term past. The most effective boards have a future orientation. They take as read the report on what has happened in the last quarter, but they then quickly pivot the discussion to the future that management is working on and providing the guidance and counsel on the future, on what to do in the future. And this is how, to the earlier question around risk, is it before or after? This is very much a before. If you talk about the future and you signal the possible risks, you don't just paint a glorious picture of the possibilities of the future, but you also look at the risks that certain actions may have. So our point is that an effective board isn't just competent in terms of we've got the right number of engineers, accountants, etc. But it is also coherent, curious, and connected. Coherent in that it has the right framework on the strategy and its actions cohere with the direction of travel. The board is curious. It asks questions. It wants to know. And lastly, it is connected. In other words, the members of the board are aligned. They don't need to be best friends, but there's alignment of behaviors, there's an alignment of perspectives that keep them connected. And to some degree, the board, even though it meets only 3 or 4 times a year, when it's really humming, it's a team. And that's what we mean by connected. So now we're going to look at the 2 ways in which we assess boards. And I may not, in fact, I know I didn't. I may not have introduced Spencer Stuart, the company, well enough. Spencer Stuart is a global...
Mpho,
Yes?
sorry
Yes.
to interrupt. Just going
Yes.
back, I like the idea of the 4 C's. They're perfect. May I be bold enough to ask if it's possible to add issues of transformation? Because the biggest challenge with our listed companies is that they will always look for people who are not going to rattle the cage. Until we
Yes.
talk about transformation, board membership is just a mere administrative governance issue that fails to go beyond the challenges that we're sitting with in the country.
Mm. And this part here around diversity, right, speaks exactly to that. So that you're not looking only at diversity of skills, you're also looking at diversity of perspectives, diversity on race, gender, age, etc. And you are now assuming that because we've now got the right diversity of skills and demographic profiles, that the chairman can make maximum use of the diversity to the company's advantage. So coming to the behaviors of board members and executives. Spencer Stuart, as I was saying, is a global leadership advisory firm that works with companies to identify and develop their leaders. Identifying leaders means on the board search side, helping the company to find the directors who will add value to the board. And secondly, development means we work with boards to ensure that the structures of the board and board dynamics actually also work to the advantage of the company. So a lot of what I'm going to say has to do with how we assess directors for appropriateness and how we assess leaders that are on the executive floor. Let me skip here.
There's an online question.
Yes, please.
Can I? Okay. Mabekwane says, are there any criteria which are interchangeable between executive and non-executive executives?
Interchangeable. Yes, there are. Yes, there are. There are a couple of skill sets that are necessary for both managers, executive managers, and board leaders. And you'll see that at the end of the presentation. What we have here is a model of leadership that talks to the importance of not only having the right people on the board, but making sure that the right people work in a constructive way to achieve outcomes. At the individual level, we look at past career. We look at capabilities. And I'll talk about which capabilities in particular in a moment. Right? But we ignore at our peril capacity and character. So career and capabilities you can see. You can see that she's a chartered accountant and she has 22 years experience in digital transformation in banks, right? So you can see that. And the capabilities, she's a strong influencer. But you ignore, and these are easily visible. That's why we put them above the ground. The factors that are less easily visible but are crucial because they form the roots from which the tree bears fruit. Our capacity, the ability to get into a new environment and grow, as opposed to come lock, stock, and barrel and just plant what you've known and do nothing about probing and stretching yourself. Character refers to style preferences. Are you a decision maker first and foremost? Are you a consensus builder first and foremost? Or are you a planner? So there are different character styles that make a boardroom effective. On the team side, the board as a team, what we can easily see is the composition. 9 board members, 4 of whom have mining experience, 2 are chartered accountants, and 3 have diverse backgrounds. That's composition, and that's the skill sets. Formal agenda is self-explanatory. What do we spend our time discussing, and why? But under the ground, you need to look at team dynamics. You need to look at trust. Trust is underestimated. Trusting a board member means you trust their intentions and you trust their skills and capability. Lastly, at the organization-wide level, there's strategy and structure, but hiding underneath our purpose, the mission, the why we are doing this, and the culture. So think of all of these as we go into the discussion of the actual behavioral traits. This is just a framework to make sure we don't leave anything out. Let's start with the behavioral characteristics of highly effective board members. The first one, and that we assess members on 5 characteristics. Remember, we're taking as read the composition in terms of skills, in terms of gender, in terms of other aspects of diversity and transformation. We are now saying, okay, we've now got our board, or we're now evaluating new board members. The first capability that we look at, or behavioral instinct, behavioral characteristic, is strategic insight and judgment, where the board member sees the big picture, doesn't get lost in the detail of the operations, and provides guidance and counsel, synthesizing really big and complex issues of markets, of customers, of regulators. They look at the external environment and synthesize a point of view and advise management on that point of view. And that's what we call strategic insight and judgment. The second one is independence of mind. Now, we're not saying people need to be lone operators, but they have the courage to dissent constructively. They will, of course, be open to persuasion. But first and foremost, they have independence of mind. And we have a way of evaluating all of these when we interview directors. Third, interpersonal influence. And that speaks to the inclusive dialogue. Can the board member, who's appropriately skilled in key areas, dialogue with the rest of the board members in a way that's constructive? Can you imagine an audit professional, and this is not I'm sure there are many auditors on this call. I'm just using them as an example. An audit committee member who's technically brilliant, but cannot communicate his or her ideas to the rest of the board in a coherent fashion, and cannot use a couple of ways of influencing. Do they influence outside the room or inside the room? Do they influence using data only, or do they influence using collaboration skills as well? So it's the degree to which you can communicate and persuade your colleagues. Some people are persuasive. Others aren't, because they're only looking at the problem from one point of view. Third one is integrity, where the individual is transparent and acts ethically. And the last one is the inclination to engage. They are more inclined to contribute in a meeting. They are prepared for each board meeting, and they make an active contribution. One of the things that one of the services that we offer is a board assessment, right? And we often hear when directors review each other in a peer-to-peer context, we often hear, she is a really competent mining engineer with a really great track record in driving health and safety in the mining environment. But she only talks when there's a mining issue. There's an operational issue. When there's a strategic issue or a financial issue, she doesn't engage. So it's around people doing their homework and being prepared or able to contribute outside their sphere of expertise. So these are the 5 behavioral traits we look out for in non-executive directors, right? And you'll see a couple of them when we come to the to answer the question that I was asked maybe a slide ago. There are some characteristics that are common to both the way we assess directors and the way we assess executives. The two are strategic insight and interpersonal influence. And you'll see these now in the context of how we evaluate the behavioral traits of high impact executives. And we have 6. One is driving results. And that is the degree to which they drive performance, seek outcomes that go beyond the ordinary without compromising on risk or ethics. The next one is acting strategically, and that's really the future focus and the degree to which they work to influence the future, aren't just, repositories of actions that have taken place at an earlier stage. The third one is leading change, enabling transformation in dynamic and complex environments. And leading change, think of the word transformation there has two contexts. One is transformation of the company in its maybe strategic and operational guise. And the second one is diversity transformation. We look for executives who can lead change, who understand the emotional, the political, and the rational elements of leading change. Leading people, and that's the way, the degree to which they align their teams to the organization's mission and goals, the degree to which they mobilize energy in the organization. And lastly, second last, collaboration and influencing. They are able to work across boundaries, organizational boundaries. So can the operations director who sits on ExCo work constructively with human resources? Human resources does not fall under him, so he has to use a number of influencing techniques to get his agenda addressed by the HR team, and together they build a future solution, a future-focused solution. So it's not relying on the formal authority in your division, but how you influence people that are outside your control. Think of the chief executive, who's got to influence regulators, whether that's the Reserve Bank, the health authorities, etc. And then lastly, building talent. Effective leaders leave a legacy of equally competent, if not more competent, people. They develop future-ready leaders and have succession pipeline. I'm getting an echo somewhere.
I've got a question. Is the echo still there?
No.
Okay. So in your work, have you seen congruence in terms of these leadership competences and the KPIs of a CEO? Because my experience is that the boards normally place emphasis on just the results. Just a comment around whether you've seen real effort going into making sure that it's a well-rounded
Yes.
approach in terms of what is expected.
Yes. So the results that are achieved are the result, pardon the pun, of these capabilities. So the results are the what that is achieved. These capabilities are the how they get those results. And often, maybe not as often as we would like, boards look at the CEO, look at the results, the performance results, especially in the near term, 1 or 2 years, and they give it a big tick, but they ignore at their peril how the executive got to those results. And usually what trips up an executive is not the brilliance of mind, it's how they led change, how they collaborated and influenced inside the organization and outside. So to answer your question, yes, there's congruence between how boards view the results and the manner in which the results were achieved. We spoke a little, or I intimated earlier, that board culture plays a great role and a really important role in coming to outcomes of the board. So we're just going to double click on board culture. We have a proprietary framework for understanding organizational culture, and in this case, board culture. And our board culture assessment diagnostic says human beings, both individuals and collectives, are best understood by their attitude or their preference for two things. On the vertical axis is their preference for change, where at the stability level, they try to control change and not let it go out of control. And that is achieved through careful planning, risk mitigation, and make sure that there's a consistent flow of activities that gets you to end results. At the stability level, they're also focused on decisiveness, the focus on results, having a focused agenda, right? And it is very much a no-nonsense style. At the top, sorry, on the horizontal axis, we have our propensity or preference for being with others. On the extreme left, we focus on individual pursuits and expertise. And at the other extreme, we focus on collective effort. The two quadrants that I haven't explained are the top left, the yellow one, which is inquisitiveness, where you are open to experimentation, new ideas, you explore alternatives. It's an agile focus. On the far right, or the blue, on the blue, it's the collaborative style, which is focusing on teamwork, consensus, everyone having a voice, and the bigger picture. So what we do is we ask board members, both current board members and the board members who are being assessed for inclusion onto the board. We ask them to take a 20-minute online diagnostic, and that gives us a sense of their preference on one of these. We also give it to the board, then we can say the board has a inquisitive nature, primarily. This individual that we're looking to bring on is more under careful planning, steady as she goes, stability level. How do you make sure that the two work hand in hand? Any questions on the model? Okay, now let's see it in operation. What you then get after all 12 members of the board have completed the questionnaire, you get a sense of the culture of the board. And we've got 4 examples here. A board that is in the lower red corner is highly outcome oriented, decisive. A board that is in the blue, with this blue dot is process focused, governance, risk mitigation, making sure that the environment is safe, not in the health and safety context, but just that we've got we plan ahead, we mitigate risks. That's our chief focus. On the green, sorry, in the top right-hand corner, it's a green board. It's a team-based relational board that is consensus-driven. As you can imagine, this board here in the red is not very consensus-driven. In the upper left-hand quadrant, we have a learning-oriented board, highly inquisitive. There's always an exchange of ideas. Board members, before the board meeting, call management and say, I've read the board paper. Have we taken this or that into account? Right? There's a new technology that I've heard about that comes out of China that does X, Y, and Z. It's an inquisitive board. It doesn't only focus on the processes, and it doesn't also only focus on the past. It looks ahead. So these are examples of 4 board cultures. Each one of these dots is a culture in the board, so that the new board member walks in knowing really what's going on in the board. Now, every board has all 4 of these characteristics. The question is, how do they rank those characteristics? And I'll show you now. Here. So this board, in this example, the current culture, it is decisive first and foremost. It looks for outcomes. Secondly, it is collaborative. They do so in a team-oriented, consensus-driven way. They are inquisitive, but it's not their top priority. They are disciplined, but it is not their top priority. So you can see the board has all 4, but it ranks their importance differently. What we then ask boards to do is say, okay, is this culture appropriate for your board? Is this culture appropriate for the near and long-term strategy and ambitions and risk profile of your board? In this instance, so we have the current culture on the left, their preferred culture on the right. And here goes. They still want to be decisive, right? But they want to dial up inquisitiveness. They want to hear management talking more often about alternative strategies, alternative technologies, experimenting. Even within themselves, they ask each other questions more than other boards would. So they've dialed up inquisitiveness. They've dialed down collaboration. It's now their 4th, where it used to be their number 2. And lastly, disciplined. Yes, they've dialed up discipline. Why? Because there have been a number of fatalities that they felt management, I'm talking about the mining environment, management wasn't taking due cognizance of. And so they've created within themselves an emphasis on discipline, both in terms of how the meetings are run and what we discuss, but also what we look out for in management proposals. We want to see processes followed. We want to see risks mitigated. And then lastly, they've dialed down collaboration because they've prioritized two other characteristics, right? What will be the result of this structured way of putting discipline up here, of this profile 1, 2, 3? The board will be less inclined to have individuals who go off on a tangent and speak for 20 minutes and they ramble. It's a board that will still maintain mutual respect and active interaction. It'll be one that focuses or asks members to be more rigorous in their preparation for board meetings. And you'll see that they will be more open, and that's the inquisitiveness going up, more open to learn about the industry and the business. So this is how you use board culture to understand the behavioral traits that will be effective in your boardroom. I'll finish off with a statement, and then we can, if there are any other questions, tackle them. Right? Our insights, integrity, and influence and engagement matter most when they align with how we think strategy, lead change, inspire people, and drive results. So we're saying insights, integrity, influence, and engagement. Those are the behaviors, the characteristics that will drive end results that are congruous with your objectives. Diversity fills the seats, and this is diversity in composition of skills, fills the seats, but it's our shared harmony in capabilities and character that keeps the organization moving. The organization is the whole organization. It's the boardroom plus the rest of the organization. So it's emphasizing key behaviors, insights, integrity, influence, and engagement that are common to both executives and non-executives. The way they come together will help us produce a very effective board. An effective board that drives or helps management drive strategic ambition, mitigate risk in a number of ways. Let me stop there and see if there are any questions, anything you'd like me to go back to.
Thank you very much for a very insightful presentation. I'm quite intrigued by the board culture slides and I guess the practicalities of how you go about changing that. I guess on the premise that a big component of a driver of that is obviously leadership, but also your members of the board and their own personalities and what they bring to the board. How quickly can you really change, the board culture in order to dial up this, I guess the elements that you want to dial up? I guess I'd also imagine that some of that is driven by where you are in the life cycle of the company and what you're trying to then achieve by establishing a certain board culture. But when I think about it, sometimes you probably need to replace board members in order to bring in a different culture, but it's not necessarily always easy if you're also prioritizing stability and continuity and all of that. So yeah, it's really about the practicality of being able to do that.
That is a very astute observation, which I'll try to answer in the following way. So each one of these dots here, right, is the behavioral trait profile of a director. Obviously, this is a large board. Okay, so we see that in this board, most of the members are orange, and orange is results and authority, or what we called in the previous. It's the decisive impulse that is most important to this particular board, right? There are a smattering of board members who are collaborative in style. There's one poor person who's out on a limb who emphasizes order and risk mitigation, orderliness of processes and risk mitigation. There are two members here who have an orientation primarily to learning, to inquisitiveness, right? Now, say this configuration of individual style preferences results in a culture or a team style that's over here, right? A team style that is primarily results and authority based. Now, the board has a board dynamics or culture session, and they agree that the style that would best suit the business based on where the business is, as you said, in its life cycle, in the challenges that it is facing, in the aspirations that it has. They say our dot should be here, right? Can you still see my mouse?
Yes, you can see it.
Okay, so we're over here in the top right-hand corner. That's where we want to be. So we've got a distance to go between our team style currently and our team style in the next 3 years. This is quite a departure, as you can see from the distance between the current team style and the new team style that is that we are moving towards. That means there's going to be a lot of work done in the 3 years. Rome was not built in a day. So they set for themselves a board culture journey, and it will have two key inputs into it. One you've mentioned: recruit people who have styles that are more in this zone here. But you can't, just turf people out 3 years into their current term. So what the second thing that you do is you show them what their style is. So we sit down with each director and give him or her their style profile, how they rank all of these things here. And we say, that is what is really important for you, and that's the style that you have enjoyed. Now, the board style is over here. How do you think you are going to make that transition? We have a discussion with them. We give them a few tips and tricks. It's not easy, but I think people who are determined to contribute to the board in a more effective manner will make the time. They will use their personal resources to make the transition. I'm not sure if that answers your question. Any others?
Thank you. No. No, there isn't. No more questions.
If I may, online, there is one from Brenda. Given the critical importance of board culture assessments for governance and sustainability, at what stage should these assessments be conducted, considering that some boards have new members annually due to rotation requirements?
Thank you. The best time to do it is in the context of your board assessment. Right? So if you do a board assessment every 3 years, you might, well, what we encourage boards to do is to incorporate the board culture analysis into the board assessment. And what you would do is in a year's, so we finished the review and it says that the team style is here in 2025. The team style we're aiming towards in 2028 is in the top right-hand corner. We will do two things in that period. We will recruit when the opportunity arises, based on retirements from the board. We will recruit people who are closer to this profile. We will also work on an agenda that helps us to make that transition. And let me give you an example. A board that wants to be more agile and learning oriented, maybe in this top right-hand corner here, right, will not only recruit people with a high curiosity, but they will structure the agenda around key questions of the future, right? So you do it in two ways: recruit new directors, and but that takes a while because people aren't retiring for the next 2 years. But also, we are going to change the way we work in the boardroom. The chairman is going to be disciplined and keep asking management and board members to focus on the future, to come to the board ready to explore new ideas. That's how you make the changes over a 2 or 3 year period. Might take a dipstick after year 1. Ask the members to take the diagnostic again and find that, okay, they've made a move and we are now over here. That's still a distance from there, but we're making good progress. Year 2, we might be here, and if we're lucky, we'll end up somewhere over here over time.
Thank you very much.